Death on Everest, a true story. May 10, 1996. Two commercial teams, led by legendary guides Rob Hall and Scott Fisher, crowd the upper ridge of Mount Everest. Clients have wired $65,000 for a single summit selfie. Their oxygen gauges are already blinking red. With just 50 vertical meters left, an unpredicted blizzard slams the mountain, freezing ropes and erasing the route in seconds. Stick around to see how ambition, chaos and reckoning unfold. The wind howled through the Khumbu icefall long before dawn, rattling seracs like a warning siren. At 5200 Tanolem in Camp the 2, Rob Hall lay rigid in his sleeping bag, senses sharp. Just below him, ice blocks the size of trucks ground against each, other opening crevasses that yawn black into the glacier's heart. Above, the south face of Everest glimmered under starlight, its slope rising another 3 kilometers to the summit ridge. By 7 degrees below zero, frost already coated ropes and crampons. Hall replayed the plan in his head. Tomorrow's carry to Camp the 3 at 6400 Mamtas, depositing extra oxygen on the Lhotse face. Then a 2 a.m. push to Camp 4 on the South Col at 7,900 Mamtas. Each camp meant thinner air, only half as much oxygen as at sea level, and exponentially higher risk of high-altitude pulmonary and cerebral edema. One wrong step in the icefall, one sudden shift of those hanging towers of ice, and the glacier could collapse without warning. Across the mountain, on the north side, Scott Fisher's team stirred in their own base camp beneath the North Col. There, katabatic winds funneled down from the Tibetan plateau, adding gusts of 60 km/h that could strip flesh from bone. Fisher's clients, fewer but faster, trusted his lightning-fast route fixes, yet even his experience couldn't tame the unpredictability of jet stream winds sweeping the summit at over 200 km/h a few tenths away. Jon Krakauer strapped on crampons for his acclimatization run. His pack held a notebook, but also a growing obsession. Why did so many pay upwards of $65,000 for a few hours in the death zone? Even now, as he climbed the steep snow slope above camp, he felt each breath thin to stabbing, each heartbeat pulsed in his ears like a cliffside drum. The mountain reduced ambition to a series of calculated gambles with frostbite, exhaustion, and altitude. Sherpas moved overhead, voices hushed in Sherpa and Tibetan prayers. Before each load carry, they spat into yak butter tea and mouthed mantras to Yeti's realm, seeking protection from the icefall's cryosphere. Their laminated site map marked dozens of previous accidents, sites where tents had been swallowed, or climbers lost forever in hidden crevasses. By mid-morning, the sun clawed the thermometer barely above 5 degrees C. Rob's radio crackled. High-pressure ridge moving in, calm winds for 48 hours. That window was his green light, but Everest's weather guards were fickle. One unexpected trough, one shift in the monsoon jet stream, and the ridge could become a wind tunnel of ice pellets. In Camp 2, Hall gathered his 10 clients, lawyers, surgeons, investment bankers, in tight semicircle on the snow. Their faces, pulled taut by frost and inner resolve, reflected every bit of the mountain's silent menace. He reminded them, summit attempts must reverse course by 2 p.m. sharp. After that, the western slope falls into deep shadow, temperatures plunge another 10 degrees C and routes vanish in blinding flat light. Above 8,000 Dotlechem, he said, you lose 2/3 of your judgment. Stay together, no heroics. We turn back at the time, no matter what. His words cut through the thin air like fixed ropes through nylon. In that moment, the clients understood that Everest's true summit was not at 8,848 Mimo. It was in the discipline to live through the descent. Meanwhile, Fisher paced his own group near the North Col, testing ice screws and adjusting gas regulators to account for temperatures dipping below 20 degrees. Watch each other, he urged. We're guides, yes, but out there you're your own best partner. His tone was lighter, but each man knew the snow labored under centuries of glacial pressure and that avalanches often roared without warning from the hanging glaciers. Above below, base camp hummed like an alpine hive. Satellite phones connected to Kathmandu, cooks ladling mutton stew, and trekkers snapping photos of billowing prayer flags. Yet every tourist snapshot masked the real Everest. an engineered gauntlet of altitude sickness, equipment failures, and microclimate extremes. As afternoon haze gathered, Hall led his team across the icefall's floating ladders and swinging beams. Each ladder bridged over 100-meter crevasses, swayed under their combined weight. At the lip of a collapsed moat, he paused, listening for hidden cracks. A distant groan answered, a reminder that, on Everest, the ground itself could betray you. At Camp 3, they stopped to check oxygen regulators against the wind and test fingers for numbness. Temperatures hovered around 15 degrees Celsius, but wind chill drove perceived cold past 30 degrees Celsius. Rob's Sherpa pointed ahead to the Lhotse face, a 1,200 meters wall of blue ice sliced by serac bands that funneled snow into deadly sloughs. Tomorrow they would climb it at dawn. That evening, tents fluttered under a crescent moon as Hall reviewed shift rotations and emergency protocols. He knew that even the best-laid plans collided with Everest's final authority. The mountain's will. Sleep came in fits, punctuated by the glacier's distant roar. And all around, those who lived to see sunrise whispered a single truth. On Everest, the summit was only halfway. The real battle lay in coming down alive. Camp 4 lay buried under a thin crust of new snow when Hall and Fisher made their final preparations. The 4 tents, huddled like frozen sentinels at 7,900 meters on the South Col, shivered in a rising wind. Temperatures hovered around 30 degrees, but the wind chill drove the perceived cold past 50 degrees C. Oxygen regulators clicked and hissed as clients leveled their masks at 2 Min, barely enough to sustain thought, let alone muscle. Summit push. At 3 a.m., headlamps bobbed into the darkness. On the South Col, Hall's team clipped into the fixed ropes that snaked toward the Hillary step. Each meter gained was a battle against gravity and hypoxia. Blood roared in their ears, vision narrowed into tunnel blur, and every breath burned, like acid. Visibility was already poor. Thin curtains of cloud clung to the ridge, lit only by the dull glow of lamps. On the north side, Fisher's line of climbers spiraled up the Cornice Traverse from the North Col. Here, fierce, katabatic, gusts funneled through the Yeti's jaw, whipping snow across knife-edged ridges. Fisher paused to lean into the wind, shoving his mask tight, then surged ahead, his clients trailing in single file, crampons scraping ice. By 6 a.m., both groups converged on the Hillary Step, the 12-mot rock face that guarded the true summit. At 8,190 meters, the air held barely one-third the oxygen of sea level. Climbers labored into gear, ropes creaking under tension. Those ahead jockeyed for position. A misstep meant losing the fixed rope lifeline and plummeting into the abyss. Hall barked terse encouragements, careful to ration his voice. Fisher offered terse nods, his cigarette forgotten as adrenaline pumped. Turning point. Just as the final climbers crested the step, hands scrabbling on ice-choked rungs, a roar like distant artillery rolled up the ridge. The sky, moments before, a ghostly apricot wash darkened to slate. A supercell of cloud spiraled in from the west, a wall of snow and wind racing toward them faster than any forecast had predicted. Visibility collapsed. 1 minute they saw the serrated skyline, the next they were engulfed in a whiteout. Ropes stiffened and froze into place, ice forming on carabiners, on harnesses, on every exposed surface. Each climber's regulator began to stick. Clients froze mid-step, goggles fogged shut, voices swallowed by the gale. A blizzard had arrived at 8,800 meters, 2 hours earlier than the weather window had promised. Survival gambits. In the shrieking chaos of the death zone, split-second decisions became matters of life and death. Hall's Sherpa, Ang Dawa, tore off his own gloves to free a client's frozen valve, blood frosting on the mechanism as he coaxed the flow of precious oxygen back to life. Meanwhile, Fisher spotted a climber gone rigid on the ridge, too disoriented to move. He sprinted through the lash of wind, buried the man's head in his arms, and hauled him to relative shelter behind a jagged rock spur. Below, other teams watched through radios glazed with static. A call crackled. Help needed at 8,800 meters. Base camp's radio operator replied with clipped instructions, but the transmission was lost in a blast of snow. Each Sherpa and guide faced the same agonizing choice: risk their own lives to reach stranded clients, or retreat and conserve dwindling supplies. Hall hesitated only a heartbeat before ordering a two-man rescue team upward, tethered by a single rope. They inched along the ridge, every anchor a potential lifeline or death sentence. In another thread, Fisher rallied his shaken group to reverse course, turning back toward the safety of Camp Fee's buried tents. Some clients resisted, summit fever clouding their judgment, but Fisher's stern command and the howling wind drove them down. By midday, the storm was at its peak. The ridge became a frozen maelstrom of spinning crystals and shrieking gusts. 2 climbers, one from each team, went missing in whiteout delirium, swallowed into the maze of seracs. Survivors huddled in small bivouac shelters, downsuits frozen stiff, ice helmets clamped tight. They waited for the storm to break, knowing that each passing minute at 8,000 plus M sapped their strength and clarity. When the wind finally eased, the mountain revealed its toll. Frozen footprints ending abruptly on the ridge, severed ropes dangling into emptiness, and the battered bodies of those who had pressed too far. Only then did the guides realize the breadth of their gamble. In the rush for the summit, the mountain had exacted its price. Chaos reigned until survival gambits, grit, and a measure of mercy triumphed over its fury. The frozen morning light crept across the South Col Ridge, illuminating a scene of devastation. Dozens of footprints, some jagged, some orderly, ended in sudden silence. At 8,800 M, the air tasted of loss. Rob Hall peered over the crest. A body lay half-buried beside a fixed rope, harness still clipped in. Below it, another figure huddled, breathing shallowly through an oxygen mask that had frozen solid. Hall signaled his Sherpa team. Ang Dawa and Lakpa Dorje moved swiftly, uncovering the derelict climber's mask and thawing the regulator with shared body heat. The man's eyelids fluttered open. Frostbitten fingers clenched Rob's hand. "Go home," Rob whispered, voice hoarse. By sheer will and a ration of precious oxygen, the client rose, each step a testament to mercy in the death zone, but not every soul could be spared. Farther along the ridge, Hall recognized the yellow-orange of Scott Fisher's down suit. Fisher had vanished in the storm's heart. Rescue teams combed the wind-scoured arete, unearthing only a lifeless form. His smile frozen on a face etched with determination, he lay as if still mid-stride, a cautionary emblem of Everest's indifference. Below, in Camp 4's battered tents, survivors emerged like phantoms from silk cocoons. Faces gaunt, eyes glassy, they embraced in unsteady relief. Some carried memories of their own choices, how they'd left teammates behind to chase the summit, how they'd pressed on when instinct begged retreat. Guilt clung to them as tightly as their frozen down jackets. By afternoon, word of the storms spread to base camp. Satellite phones crackled with calls from spouses, corporate offices, and media outlets. A reporter asked, "How many died?" Rob's voice caught, then steadied. 11 this season, 10 in this storm. He paused. Every one of those lives came at a cost. That evening, around the communal stove, guides and Sherpas argued, quietly over cups of lukewarm tea. Had commercialization doomed the expedition? Clients with little high-altitude experience, drawn by glossy brochures and summit day guarantees, who paid the price in adrenaline and oxygen? Sherpas pointed to discarded oxygen bottles and dead bodies as proof that permits and logistics couldn't remake the mountain into a theme park. John Krakauer sat apart, notebook closed. He had witnessed success and failure become indistinguishable at 8,848 meters. In the glow of headlamps, he saw climbers wrestling with the myth of conquering nature. Who were they to think they could tame Everest's ever-shifting icefall, its jet stream winds, its appetite for human hubris? As the sun dipped behind the western CWM, Rob climbed a small moraine above camp. He looked back at the serrated silhouette of Everest, unchanged, indifferent, eternal. Here on the ragged boundary between life and death, the mountain had taught its harshest lesson. Triumph is fleeting, and respect is the only true summit. Below him, The camp settled into uneasy quiet. Tomorrow they would bury the bodies they could reach, leave the rest to the glacier's slow march. Tomorrow they would tally the cost of ambition, of sacrifice, of a world that believed Everest could be bought and sold. For now, they simply watched the peaks turn pink in the dying light, knowing that the reckoning had only just begun.